Good morning and welcome to Citizen Extra. I am Ann Kiguta. We are taking you across the country where news is breaking just about a month to the general election. In studio this hour, we're speaking to Reo Cheng, a governance analyst, Professor George Wajakoya, who's a law lecturer and political analyst, Gabriel Mudhuma, a political analyst, alongside Mark Bichachi of the same. So we're talking very shortly about the campaign trail, which certainly is hotting up. That in a little bit. We're also taking you live to various locations across the country, following in particular for you the nurses' strike, which continues. John Wanyama will be joining us very shortly from Eldoret, giving us an update on the situation there, alongside Laura Cheng, who is live for us in Kisumu. Let's begin by taking you to Kisumu now, where Laura is standing by. Good morning. Give us an idea of what's going on with the strike, what are nurses saying, and how are services at hospitals?
Yes, thank you very much and a very good morning to you back at the Communication Center. And here in county number 042 today we will be following up on the nurses' strike. Of course, the health officials here are actually off duty. Those are the nurses in all government hospitals and government health centers. And speaking earlier on to the officials of the Kenya National Union of Nurses here in Kisumu, they said that they will be having demonstrations on the streets later today just to push to see if the CBA will be signed. And of course, reports you are receiving are that a lot of people are actually dying at home and they're actually being buried directly, not even being brought to morgues, because most people complain that they cannot afford private medical health care. And of course, now we'll be talking to the officials to hear their views on that, on the same, and see if they'll actually be willing to go back to work. But as it stands right now, they insisted that if the CBA is not signed, then they will not be returning to duty. And of course, we saw the Doctors Union Secretary General, Mr. Oluga, actually coming in to say that county governments should move with speed to resolve the nurses' strike. But here in Kisumu County, the situation is that there's no nursing activities being given in public hospitals, and doctors insist that until the nurses come back, then they cannot be able to dispense their duties fully. So that is a story we'll be following up on, and we will be bringing you an update here from Kisumu. Back to you in studio.
Thanks very much, Laura, for that. We're going to be watching for those protests a little later. Let's get the situation that's taking place in Eldoret. John Wanyama is now standing by. John, what are nurses saying today as their strike continues?
Thank you. And here nurses are still holding on that they are still on strike. And today is 1 month, 6 days since the Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital began their strike here in Uasin Gishu County. And these nurses have said they will never relent until the government gives them what they want. And as you remember, Anne, last week, Sarah Serem gave Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital a report for the hospital, which nurses feel like it's undermining them, and some of them feel like their salary have been cut off. Something they have said they are not going to accept at all. And it's not only here in Uasin Gishu County, even Elgeyo Marakwet and the neighboring counties here are also going through the same. And yesterday also we saw lecturers from various universities, University of Eldoret, Moi University, joining the lecturer strike yesterday. Yesterday also we saw Uchumi workers here in Eldoret went also on strike, demanding for their 2-month salary. And today also we are expecting 1,000 to 3,000 IDPs from this region who will be also demonstrating, maybe asking the government to pay them. And the country is really suffering because of these strikes. And today I have a political analyst, and we want to talk to him about what about this strike and the politics currently in this region, entire North Rift. Mr. Speaker, if you can talk to us, how do you feel about this nurses strike, lecturer strike, but specifically let's match on nurses strike? Do you think county government have failed on this nurses strike?
I think it is good for Kenyans to appreciate where we've come from. Since the time that we've had devolution, we know with certainty that the government, both the national and the county government, has managed to dismantle the cartels that are operating within the Ministry of Health, Afya House. And some of the things that we are witnessing across the country for the last 3 years partly could be associated with the fighting back of the cartels. We know for a fact that like in Elgeyo Marakwet, when we came into power, we had to do what we call a staff establishment. We found out that we used to be having a lot of good workers. And I believe that there is a lot of force that is trying to fight and ensure that health is returned back to the national government. Remember, in the Schedule 4 of our Constitution, two functions are almost 100%. That is health and in agriculture. And I know for a fact that there are forces that are trying to demonize that the county governments are not in a position to manage health services. A good example is in Elgeyo Marakwet. We have been ranked among the best performing health referral hospital. We are now even receiving patients from other counties. So we have actually demonstrated that it is possible for a county government to manage their health services. Secondly, is the transition period, because the other day we had the issues of the doctor strike, and we actually discovered that the CBA, the problem with the CBA was during the transition. When the Kibaki government, there were some of the things that were signed by the ministers by then, and those transitions came back. If you look at the current situation that is going on in nurses, it is again to a great extent the issue of the CBA that was signed previously. And I want to appeal, and the direction that this country is taking in terms of strike is really alarming, particularly when it comes to the issues of health. I believe strongly that where people are able to have a dialogue and be able to talk over this thing, because I can tell you our Kenyans, a lot of Kenyans are dying at the moment, and I want to appeal again to His Excellency the President to intervene. My President, I kindly appeal that you intervene on this matter, because continuously, and Kenyans are asking a lot of questions, why are the leaders continuously seeking votes? Yet again, our striking nurses are making our Kenyans die every day. I think that we need to have a break for one day, both in NASA and in the because some of the governors are from NASA, the governors are for Jubilee. But on these matters of health, we should be able to do away with either whether you are Jubilee or in NASA, but we have to address these things because Kenyans are suffering.
Thank you very much, Anne. We are still following up on these stories, and we will come back to you once we get facts and details. Back to you, Studio Anne.
Thanks very much, Wanyama. For that, I believe you're speaking to the Speaker of the Elgeyo Marakwet County Assembly, Albert Kote. All right. Let's just catch up with that report joined in studio by my analysts Rio Cheng, Professor George Wajakoya, Gabriel Mudhuma, and Mark Bichachi. Mark, I'll start with you. Do you believe it is insensitive for politicians to continue, drumming up support across the country at a time when a major health crisis is still unraveling?
In fact, I was just having a discussion as the speaker was speaking with my panelists here. The truth of the matter is this, that though healthcare is a devolved function, it is still a national issue. And it's funny to me that both Jubilee and NASA have ignored this issue by and large. And I think it's kind of insensitive to the people of Kenya to say that you are running for president on either side and not being able to address this issue. Healthcare is a core function. It's a core debate even in the United States of America, so we cannot ignore it simply because it's devolved. I think it needs to have a political solution as well as a technical solution, and I honestly believe that our presidential candidates have let us down by not talking about this issue and giving a way forward, because at the end of the day, the person who's president needs to give guidance even to the governors at county level.
Ray, do you believe that this is a costly political move to ignore the issue of the ongoing nurses' strike?
Yeah, it is, Anne, and after long hiatus, I'm glad to be back. And what happens is we over-constitutionalized this country, and we left this to be done by lawyers and parliamentarians who did not bring all the professionals into perspective. three key areas that should have not been devolved. One was education, security, and then health, because these are very fundamental pillars. But where we are and why what you're saying is true is because this is a very, Kenyans are dying, that's a fact. It's a very sad moment. But again, the politicians have also been caught in a catch-22 situation. Why? Because remember, these strikes are really coming at the time of elections, because all the sectors that are striking know very well that this is the time that all the political parties and formations are very disparate to get the numbers. So again, it's also not so good, because I feel they should have really come and brought these issues much earlier. So right now, the president and the NASA formation, I think right now it would be very difficult for them to address this matter. But for the numbers, they may have to commit themselves to something that may not be palatable after they win the election. All right,
George, and if it is costly, does it then cost the current administration more than it would the opposition? After all, they're not in a position to bargain with these unions, despite the fact that even though it is a devolved function, you know, it affects both sides of the political divide. There are governors from both sides of the political divide who should be part of the solution.
Actually, thank you very much for asking that question. While I agree with my friends who are looking at it from the domestic arena, I would rather want to go outside the box and look at the success stories. One of them being India on healthcare policy, Cuba, and the National Health Services in the UK, which is actually privatized. All that ought to have been looked into was, what do we do with this cancer called healthcare? Who are the stakeholders in this organization? Do we look at the pharmacists? Do we look at the patients? Do we look at the health industry holistically? And what are the solutions? Privatization could have been key. Privatization under control in terms of medical fee. They should have come up with a solution right from the beginning, because healthcare industry is a very difficult industry even for the Americans today. If you look at what the Obama tried to do to bring in the US, the Obamacare, which is now being repulsed by the Trump administration, we have a problem there. If you look at the NHS in England, which has not come to conclusion, even though under privatization, we have a problem there. Now, if we come to this country and look at the constitution and look at the devolved services of healthcare, we have a problem there. This is an issue that required both investor, consumer friendly kind of organization, so that would give key role to privatization. Another thing is issue of unions. Look at what Margaret Thatcher did when she came in power under the Conservative government after the Labour Party had been in power for 18 years. She did away with the unions. Some of these unions also ought to be looked into. Thank you.
So to my question, do you believe that the current administration suffers more from this ongoing strikes politically, or do you think that the public will also look at it at a county-by-county basis?
I don't think so, because remember that we have a constitution which is at the incubation, number one. Number two, both parties in NASA and in Jubilee government are part of this problem, because they were there when these policies were being made in one way or the other. And if it is that we have to equalize blame, then we blame both parties, not just one party.
All right. Gabriel, is it your opinion that some of these unions, as Professor Wajakoya has said, need to be looked into, that there may be something fishy going on?
First of all, and let me start by actually amplifying what Bichache has just said, and I agree with him to quite a large extent. Is it going to hurt actually the political class at this point? And I say yes, to an extent, because number one, the patient, who happens to be the voter in this case, does not understand where the problem is. They understand they are not getting the service, and they don't care who has led them to where they are. You saw very well after we went through the whole thing with the doctors, and it got to a point where the president had to make a serious mark on the whole process, and he said, okay, I'm giving in on this basis that I'm removing this money, and if you go on strike again, it will be, you would have pushed me actually to the wall. And the president actually in good faith released that money. And do you know, up until last month, some of those doctors had not been paid. while the money had been released in December. So that just tells you there is a very big issue when you talk about policies and process, like our good professor is talking about. So you have, and I was among the people who are not so comfortable with devolving healthcare, mainly and primarily because there was no what you'd call a well-fervent, grounded policy on how those services were going to reach the common 190. So when the nurses go on strike, you have patients who are left in the hospitals, they succumb to the illnesses. Their families will not understand that this is a devolved function. They will understand that our beloved are dying and the government is not doing anything. So if you come to talk about the political class, yes, you have county governments. Half of our people don't know that actually the services are devolved, and the governors should actually be part and parcel of this mess. What they are looking at is that the services are not being rendered. So yes, if you're talking about people taking the blame, the governors must actually squarely come out and take responsibility.
But what about unions? Do you believe unions have been politicized and that there's need to probe them, maybe even disband some?
To me, the unions, and not only the nurses, and I know we may digress a little bit, even, I mean, you saw the education just the other day, somebody who has actually been putting this country on a striking board just getting up.
You're saying?
Exactly. So to me, the unions have become so politicized, and they do this. You know, I don't want to say whether the timing is right or wrong, but it's very suspect. But we cannot have unions that actually do not feel that the common 190 is suffering. Before anything else, with the doctors and the nurses, can we, and at the very least, have what you call humanity, utu? All right, that there is actually a Hippocratic oath that these people sign to before it becomes anything monetary. And having said that, can we have policies? And this cuts across both divides, whether you're in government, whether you are in the opposition. Bring this framework together, because this is the only thing, this is the only way that it will work. The government is saying that we have this amount of governors, the opposition is saying we must have we have this amount of governors. Can these governors come together? There is a summit. Can the president actually push people to talk, and devoid of unions? Because if we are going to expect our unions to solve some of these things we are going through, we are actually going to be counting boarding bags by the day.
All right, we're going to switch gears now and take you to the campaign trail. Of course, yesterday President Kenyatta was in Ukambani, and the NASA presidential candidate Raila Odinga was in Kiambu. Ray, let me begin with you on this one. What is your assessment of the forays that each side is trying to make into the other's quote-unquote home turf?
And we saw in the week both presidential candidates going to definitely the horses, I mean. And I don't know why the mules are not being covered, but what happens here is that we saw a different kind of messaging and a very reconciliatory messaging from both parties. We saw Raila in Kiambu, and he was giving the historical perspective and really starting of how Kenyatta has been a founding father of this nation and has really helped this nation. And we saw the president and the team going to Kalonzo's turf, and really speaking positive of Kalonzo. So I think in terms of these home turfs, both formations are getting it right in terms of reconciliatory messaging. And for Kiambu, I think Kiambu has really set a very high bar in terms of what they did, and I think counties should also now follow suit. And again, even the presidential candidates now, even they have a challenge, because I think Kiambu did Jubilee very proud, because now even NASA has to make sure that when the president goes to their strongholds, then if there'll be violence, then they may definitely become the postcards of violence. So I think what is going on, and I like the messaging. I hope that this messaging can also be translated down and cascaded to other very tough areas that are not home turf.
All right. Mark, is it your assessment that both these leading camps, if you like, are actually looking to make significant inroads, or is this just to show that they are national outfits and therefore reach out to every area? And bring to bear, if you would, the fact that in the last election, I mean, Raila Odinga did get some significant numbers in central Kenya.
You know, the most interesting thing and what excites me about this particular period in campaigning in Kenya is for the first time these two candidates are acting that they don't want to just win an election, but they want to win a country after this, because that's the most important part. The part is not just winning your strongholds, it's about being able to be seen that you're the president of every Kenyan and not on sides, and that flies in the face of what Lee tweeted the other day, and I'm so glad that the principals have taken this stance. The second thing that this shows is that when you have political goodwill, then there can be no sort of violence in this country. Why? Because there's no one to galvanize that violence, and that goes credence to the IEBC, because when they called out the Bungoma governor and his opponent and called them out and fined them for the violence that happened within their regions, I think that has gone a long way in toning down the rhetoric in this country. Now, to answer the question as to whether this is a PR stunt or it will actually translate into votes, the issue is this, and this is what Kenyans need to be very aware of. First and foremost, Jubilee has the burden of incumbency. That means they are both to blame for the good and the bad in the country. So they have to balance that out. And the second part is Raila has not been in office for more than 5 years, and it's the first time in the last 3 elections that Kenyans actually have an incumbency and an opposition, because all the other times it's always been some form of nusu something. You know, in 2002 everyone had just left KANU. In 2007 Raila had just fallen out with Kibaki. In 2013 everyone was either deputy president or deputy what do you call it, prime minister. So basically everyone has been incumbent in every election other than this one, and it's a sign of maturity when they're able to foray into their opponent's staffs and be able to be received warmly, and that's an amazing and beautiful thing for the country. Now the question remains, will they be able to translate into votes? Not necessarily, but it will translate to a better nation for all of us.
But having said that, we have NCIC, you know, mapping out 20 counties where they're expecting violence. So when you see this sort of warm and cordial reception for these leaders in areas that were not their traditional support base, I mean, is this for show, or is it the reality that there's tolerance on the ground? I mean, are we getting mixed signals here?
You know, the funniest thing is this, that we keep divorcing violence from the politicians that cause it. The truth of the matter is, if any Kenyan is going to be violent, you'll get out of your house and then you'll go throw stones and whatever. Then at the end of the day you'll be hungry, you'll need food and stuff like that, and then you'll sober up. But anytime you see protracted violence, the fact is Napoleon said that armies march on their stomachs. So the question is not whether the people are willing to fight, is who's feeding that stomach to keep the fight going. If we're able to handle our politicians, there can be no violence in this country. That's my strong belief, and I believe it's true, because history has proven it.
All right. I want to focus a little bit on the fact that Alfred Mutua was missing from the president's, you know, entourage, if you like. He has previously, you know, declared support for him, but was conspicuously absent in his own backyard. What do you make of that, Gabriel?
Well, I noticed the very same thing, but I don't want to read too much into it, because you're looking at somebody who is also very heavy in campaigning for Maendeleo Chap. So if just not reading deep into it, you know, it just shows you that you have, you know, people who still want to work with the president. He still has Jubilee members. I think there's a Jubilee candidate who was actually quite present. And you know, not to raise the stakes high, I think Governor Mutua at this point is burning the midnight oil, traversing the entire county to ensure that he's re-elected. And
oh, come on, are you being economical? Did he, is he learning from the reception that Ababu Namwamba got back home?
Probably could have been, and that's why I don't want to read too much into it. I mean, it would have added some element of mileage just to see him, you know, hanging around the president. But again, this was the president. This was his game. This was Jubilee, and you know, him being a friendly, you know, to the Jubilee party, he also has his own campaign to do. Now, the other thing which I thought would come to play is you have Maendeleo Chap people, and you also have Jubilee members who are running for the same seats. So, you know, probably he would have, you know, the president would have been seen as he's giving probably his what you'd call a due advantage, you know, to people in Jubilee, and you know they are still in the same friendly party.
What do you think? Oh, okay.
It is a very, you know,
you're at pains to defend that position.
Let me tell you something. You're taking a lot of time. No. I tried interpreting the same situation in Kirinyaga, and honestly, I could not go more than 3 steps. You were like, okay, here you have Anne Waiguru, and here you have Martha Karua. And as the president had it, I don't know who had advised him, he actually kept away from, you know, appearing to favor any.
Oh, so Alfred was learning from the president.
I think so. And honestly, the president was in a very weird situation. Let me put it that way. And my balance would agree. Very in fact, you know, and I knew this would happen. You saw also in Kiambu, you know, between Kabogo supporters and Waitito. At one point, the president was told, you know what, up on top, you know, we've figured out, we'll give you that vote, but when it comes to, you know, these other seats, kindly allow us. So I don't think he wanted to continue mixing.
Gabriel, to extend your hand, I think the president and the governor may have talked before the rally.
Right.
And also we should not forget that right now Chap is actually behind which party in terms of fielding the candidates in this election. So what Gabriel you're saying, I totally agree with you. Even the governor would have also caught himself in a very difficult situation, because right now he's got the numbers that even some other major parties do not have. And so I think the best way was to keep off, and I think Gabriel does not have many words around that. And I think that's where we can reach.
Professor, what is your own thoughts on the same, and is Wavinya Ndeti proving to be a significant challenger for Alfred Mutua, to the extent that you know, Mutua has no choice but to really leave it to the people to pick on their presidential candidate and hope that his silence would allow him, you know, the lee room to win the election?
Yeah, before I go on that question, I want to retract a little bit and go back to Kiambu and comment on what happened, which to me is very historical, given the fact that Kikuyus are perceived to be tribalist. Let it be a learning lesson from other people.
Kikuyus are perceived to be tribalist?
Yeah, people perceive Kikuyus to be...
Is that a personal opinion, or you
No, it's not personal. I am a Luya, and I know the perception about Kikuyus. Kikuyus
from the entire Luya community?
Probably, I want to know.
The word is perception.
Yes, perception. Yeah, perception, sorry. Yeah. So what happened in Kiambu is a milestone, and I'll agree with the panelists. People expected that to happen in Kakamega. People expected that to happen in the coast. But I'll credit the Babayao, Waititu, for having asked the Kiambu people to give Raila Odinga that welcoming. And that will remain in history, because people also look at Babayao as a person who has no ABCD. But what he did yesterday, was very, very mature.
Prof, are you sure he's the one who did that?
Well, I saw him speak. I mean, I was following, because I have a lot of interest in Kiambu myself, given the fact that my party has a lot of members in Kiambu County, and given also the fact that we have 1.6 million non-Kiambus working in Kiambu. So the Kiambu issue is going to create, or has created, a pedestal matching the West, where people welcome leaders from other communities, welcome leaders who can and actually host them without any incident of stone throwing. So that one I credit Kiambu people. Now coming to Wavinya Ndeti. Yes, Wavinya Ndeti is not just somebody to put aside. That's number one. Number two, she's a woman. And this is the first time Kambas are having, this second time Kambas are having a second gubernatorial candidate who is a woman, a lady, after Madam Madam Kitui, what's her name again?
Charity
Ngili, yes. So if Mutua made any mistake of appearing with the president, that would have given Wavinya Ndeti leverage to speak about it. She would have come up and said, look, we've been telling you, my problems are associated with Mutua. Now he has brought you Jubilee here. What do you want? And given the fact that Kiambu, Machakos is a NASA stronghold, that would have actually brought in some kind of ramifications for Mutua.
You know, and my view is quite interesting. If you look at the popularity of political figures in this nation, then we know for a fact that Sonko is high, and then Uhuru those are the two most popular candidates in this country. And if you look at the statistics, if this was a single person ticket, then Uhuru would win just based on his popularity. So the fact of managing Uhuru's popularity and leveraging it in what are strongholds that are not perceived to be Jubilee strongholds, it has to be a very clever strategy on the part of Jubilee, because Uhuru remains very popular with large swaths of the population. And remember, this is a 50+1 election. So for Uhuru to go into Machakos and these particular areas, and for him to win just 1 vote or 2 votes makes it very, very critical. So for Jubilee, it is a credence to them. They have to maximize on the popularity of the president to make sure that he can come back. That's something that they have to do.
And not only that, and let me just add very quickly, you know what Mark has said. You may have realized the message actually when they go to this stronghold has significantly changed. You heard what Raila was talking about. In fact, he took us to the historic precedent on how he has actually supported the Kikuyu nation. He started out, you know, he came, the people he's put through parliament, the likes of Isaac Maora. He told us about, you know, how he campaigned to, for Kibaki when he was in London in hospital. Uhuru also, the message that he took, and that's why I would agree also with Ray, it was more like a conciliatory message. It was bringing people together, and they realized that, you know, I think they are framing where they are going right now to areas where you have high undecided votes. If they are really looking at the opinion poll that we saw last time, everybody wants to get a significant amount of that number. 8% undecided, and that's a very huge.
It's a significant number.
It is a very huge number. And should it suffice that they are able to take the message, which is what I'm liking as a voter. It has changed. The rhetoric is really going down, and people are now starting to come up with facts. You heard what Uhuru said, you know, these are the amount of dams that we have started. We know water has been an issue, and this is what we've done. Raila also took the message home, and he really pounded on his message. You know, I have never been your enemy. You guys called me a hero, you know, some time back. So that has never changed with me. I'm your friend. And really, he's taking the message that at the end of the day, he says chaos will not bring order. All right,
and we're going to talk about campaign rhetoric in the next hour, but just winding up this hour on the, you know, the campaigns that we saw yesterday, and looking ahead, Mark has talked about the fact that if it was a one-man contest, the president would win purely based on popularity, and that it would be up to Jubilee to leverage that. Ray, how is that possible beyond what he's already done? Is there any other way to make him any more popular than what he already is, or has this card already been played?
And it's very evident, and I've been on record here and I've said that if the president can even come to Nyanza, he can even pull huge crowds and even Raila Odinga, because the president is always a good man. He's a likable man. And you've always seen in terms of rhetorics and the headquarters of analysts, we talk about DP being that abrasive and very going tough on the opponents, and that has not really gone well with the president. You heard even what Musalia Mudavadi said yesterday. He said, we forgive the president. What was he trying to say? The president has been somebody that is very likable. The only thing that I disagree with George, I think Mike Sonko is not the #2 popular person in this country.
It would be relevant.
Yeah, a lot of things have changed. But the fact is, and I think the president, if the president will go at it, and I expect if the president will go alone in some counties, and it's going to be very interesting. You look at where we were here when you went to Kisii, and you even heard what people said. So I think in terms of the way Gabriel has said, in terms of they'll be having specific strategies for specific counties, depending on need, depending on polarization, depending on perceptions. So I think that would really be good for him, rather than sometimes carrying the troop of the razzmatazz and the chest thumpers that may even lock the undecided vote that we're talking about 8%, which is quite high and can decide a lot.
Would you go as far as then to predict that perhaps in areas that are not traditional strongholds for Jubilee, that it is more than likely that you'll see, maybe, or even in traditional Jubilee strongholds, that it's more than likely that you see the president getting the vote, but perhaps not, you know, his footmen?
He will, and certainly he will. The president is a likable person. I know we've always said the president is good at PR, But as a person, you've even seen how he shakes hands of opponents, and both alike. He's
quite a handshaker.
Yeah, very firm handshake.
You want to keep your arm up.
Very dramatic and a very happy person. So I think if he may go it alone on some of these strong areas, and he may get some few votes that down the web, governors and some MPs may not get.
Okay, so today Raila Odinga, the NASA presidential candidate, will be in Kericho. He's attending a burial there. Possibly we may see him campaign thereafter. We're not sure about that. Kalonzo and Mudavadi will be in Machakos. Maybe trying to undo any inroads that Jubilee may have made with their Ukambani tour, and I think shortly we'll be able to tell you where the president will be. So that's what the campaign trail looks like for you this hour. In the next hour, we're talking about campaign rhetoric. Are the manifestos lining up to what the top two have been saying on the campaign trail? We're talking after the break. Stay with Citizen Extra.